Welcome to Escaping the Echo Chamber. I want to go over day 2 of the January 6 hearings because I think this is the most important day for individuals that think that the election was stolen. So, individuals that believe that Donald Trump was cheated, that the Democratic Party did a whole bunch of nonsense in stealing the election, not just your regular run of the mill nonsense in doing what parties do, but in believing that they actually committed fraud, committed crimes. Day 2 of the January 6 hearings breaks down that. Like that's what the focus of day 2 was. So while some other days talked about the actual riot and other stuff, day 2 focused on was the election stolen, and that's what I want to review some of the testimony from day 2 to break that down.
Remember where you were on the night of the election, November the 3rd?
I was at the White House.
You know where specifically over the course of that night you spent your time within the White House?
There was an event that was organized in the residence, so I moved between the residence, a room sort of off the residence where some family members were.
I take it the president was upstairs in the residence.
He was upstairs. We were kind of on the first floor, so not upstairs. We were with mostly with Ivanka and her brothers and a couple other people who'd be coming in and out.
Can you just describe the atmosphere? What were people expecting that night when you got to the White House?
I think that there was, typically for people who show up there on election night, it's going to be a self-select, more positive environment. I think people were a little bit nervous, not knowing what was going to happen with the red wave or the red mirage as the debate was being carried out.
So I want to point out a couple of things. We just saw the testimony statements from 3 people: Jason Miller, part of Trump's campaign; Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law; and Ivanka, Trump's daughter. So these are all 3 people who are heavily in support of Trump, and they haven't even said anything yet. But I just want you to take a look at these individuals are the ones talking. But what Jason Miller just said there is we're nervous, we're anxious, it's election night. The last night of the campaign, that's when everybody's like, okay, did the hard work we put in throughout this campaign, did it pay off? What's going to happen? And so he mentions 2 things, the red wave or the red mirage. These were always a possibility. Like that's what I want to reiterate, that there was a possibility that it wasn't going to pan out like they thought it was going to pan out. And they acknowledged just going in. They knew this was a possibility that they wouldn't be able to win this. They knew that was a possibility going in.
Fox News Decision Desk is calling Arizona for Joe Biden. That is a big get for the Biden campaign.
Arizona's called. Do you remember that?
I do.
What do you remember happening where you were when Arizona was called?
There was surprise at the call.
Who was surprised?
Most everyone in the room.
Were you being one of them?
Yes.
Did that shift the atmosphere, the attitude in the White House?
Completely.
How so? Can you describe that?
Because Fox News was the first one to go out and say that.
So was it anger kind of directed towards Fox News for making a call more so than like disappointment that maybe the campaign lost Arizona?
All the above.
So both anger and disappointment.
Both disappointed with Fox and concerned that maybe our data or our numbers weren't accurate.
So when Arizona gets called, it changes the game. And I remember that. I remember when Arizona, I was like, I wasn't, because I'm not a fan of Biden. I didn't vote for Trump. I'm not a Trump supporter, but I'm not a fan of Biden either. So when Arizona went, I was like, I really expected it to go for Trump. And that was a major moment in the night, in the tabulation. And you see, Stepien, Jason Miller, and Bill Stepien. By the way, Bill Stepien was Donald Trump's campaign manager, and he's also a former White House political director. So once again, we've got people that are within Trump's inner circle are discussing this.
Were you in the White House residence during the sort of past midnight into the early morning hours of November 4th?
Yes, oh, sure. It went over beyond midnight, yes.
Do you remember Rudy Giuliani being at the White House on election night and into the early hours the next morning?
I do.
What do you remember about when he came?
He was, I had heard that he was upstairs, in that aforementioned reception area. And he was looking to talk to the president. And it was suggested instead that he come talk to several of us down off the map room.
You said that you had heard that Mr. Giuliani wanted to talk to the president and then he was directed your way. Did you end up talking to Mr. Giuliani when he was directed your way?
I did.
What was that conversation?
A lot of conversations were directed my way. A few of us, myself, Jason Miller, Justin Clark, and Mark Meadows, gathered in a room off the map room to listen to whatever Rudy presumably wanted to say to the president.
Was there anyone in that conversation who, in your observation, had too much to drink?
Like Mayor Giuliani.
Tell me more about that. What was your observation about his potential intoxication during that discussion about what the president should say when he's addressed the nation on election night?
And the mayor was definitely intoxicated, but I do not know that his level of intoxication when he spoke with the president, for example.
Were you part of any discussions with the people I mentioned, Mr. Steffi and Mr. Meadows, or anyone else, about whether the president should make any sort of speech on election night?
I mean, I spoke to the president. They may have been present, but President spoke to the president several times that night.
There were suggestions by, I believe it was Mayor Giuliani, to go and declare victory and say that we won it outright.
It was far too early to be making any calls like that. Ballots were still being counted. Ballots were still going to be counted for days. And it was far too early to be making any proclamation like that.
I remember saying that, to the best of my memory, I was saying that we should not go and declare victory until we had a better sense of the numbers.
So now you have Jason Miller and Bill Stepien, Trump's campaign manager, telling him, no, we shouldn't be declaring victory. We don't know yet. We don't know yet. But you have Giuliani saying, hey, let's just go ahead and declare victory. Now, what is he basing this on? That's the point. Because Bill Stepien and Jason Miller are saying, we don't have the numbers yet. It's too early. Bill Stepien saying it's too early. We haven't even, there's days left of counting ballots. We know there's days left to count ballots. We know this because we know that there was ballots mailed in that aren't going to be counted for days. We know this. How are we going to declare victory before these ballots are counted? We knew this coming in, what was going to happen this night. We knew this. But this dude wants, Giuliani, he wants to do a touchdown dance at the 50-yard line, and they're like, what's wrong with you?
Okay, can you be more specific about that conversation, in particular what Mayor Giuliani said, your response, and then anybody else in the room's response?
I think effectively Mayor Giuliani was saying, we want it. They're stealing it from us. Where'd all the votes come from? We need to go say that we won. And essentially that anyone who didn't agree with that position was being weak.
What was your view at the time as to what he should or shouldn't say?
I don't know that I had a firm view as to what he should say in that circumstance. The results were still being counted. It was becoming clear that the race would not be called on election night.
Ivanka, Donald Trump's daughter, is saying it's clear. It's clear the race is not going to be called tonight. So now there are people who want to run with what eventually happens. Oh yeah, no, it was over. No, it wasn't over. There's a bunch more votes to be counted. So, like, there are people who will criticize certain individuals, but now we've got Bill Stepien, Jason Miller, Ivanka. Ivanka's saying we have there are more votes to be counted. She knows that there's more votes to be counted. But Giuliani says, hey, just go ahead and declare victory.
My belief, my recommendation was to say that votes were still being counted. It's too early to tell, too early to call the race. But, we proud of the race we ran, and we, think we're in good position, and we'll have more to say about this, the next day, whenever we had something to say.
And did anybody who was a part of that conversation disagree with your message?
Yes.
Who was that?
The president disagreed with that. I don't recall the particular words. He thought I was wrong. He told me so, and that they were gonna, go he was gonna go in a different direction.
This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. We did win this election.
Now, what's really important to notice is his campaign manager, Donald Trump's campaign manager, is telling him, hey, let's just say, hey, we're in a good position. We're in a position to win this. And it's looking good. You can keep it upbeat, spin it, make sure everyone's like, hey, listen, this is still an active thing. We're in position. This can happen. So we're just gonna wait for the rest of the results to come in. This is what they could have said. This is what he wanted him to say. And he goes, no, I want to go in a different direction. So he gets up on stage, goes in the Giuliani direction. And so what Donald Trump says is they won the election. He says, oh, it's a fraud. With not one single shred of evidence. Not one single shred of evidence. Donald Trump looks at the cameras, looks at his audience, and tells them it's a fraud. The election was stolen. Not a single shred of evidence. Remember, this is election night. Now, if he thinks there's some irregularities, if he thinks there's something suspicious, he says, we can look at things. We're going to look at things. Cool. That's not what he says. He gets up there and just makes up something that he has no evidence for. We won the election. It's a fraud. What was he basing that on?
They saw a big truck bringing in 100,000 ballots in garbage cans, in waste paper baskets, in cardboard boxes, and in shopping baskets. And every single one of them was for Biden because they were being notified by Smartmatic in Frankfurt that Biden was way behind and they better come up with a lot more ballots. And we can prove every single thing I just said. If you gave me the paper ballots, I could probably turn around each one of these states. I'm absolutely convinced if you let me examine each one of those ballots, I pull out enough that were fraudulent that it would shake the hell out of the country.
It can set and run an algorithm that probably ran all over the country to take a certain percentage of votes from President Trump and flip them to President Biden, which we might never have uncovered had the votes for President Trump not been so overwhelming in so many of these states that it broke the algorithm.
I remember that one of the things Mark said at some point was, you can't show an actual vote was flipped, which I found at the time to be a remarkable assertion because you don't have to have the gun to see the body lying on the floor bleeding out with 5 bullet holes in it was killed by a gun.
Okay, so boxes and boxes of fake votes. This is what Giuliani's claiming. Giuliani's claiming there's boxes and boxes of fake votes. That's how they stole the election. Sidney Powell's on stage claiming that there's an algorithm. There's an algorithm that's switching votes from Donald Trump to Joe Biden.
They were proposing, I thought was nuts. And the theory was also completely nuts, right? I mean, there's a combination of Italians, Germans. I mean, different things have been floating around as to who was involved. Remember, Hugo Chavez and the Venezuelan, she has an affidavit from somebody who says they wrote a software in, it's something with the Philippines. just all over the radar.
Did you ever share, Mr. Kushner, your view of Mr. Giuliani? Did you ever share your perspective about him with the president?
I guess, yes.
Tell me what you said.
Basically, not the approach I would take if I was you.
Okay. And how did he react? How did President Trump react when you shared that view with him?
We said, I have confidence in Rudy.
I think I had conversations with probably all of our council who are signed up to assist on election day as they disengaged with the campaign. The general consensus was that the law firms were not comfortable making the arguments that Rudy Giuliani was making publicly. I seem to recall that I had a similar conversation with most all of them.
I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was bullshit. And, I didn't want to be a part of it. And that's one of the reasons that went into me deciding to leave when I did.
Even Sidney Powell, defending herself in a defamation lawsuit brought by Dominion Voting Systems, argued that, quote, no reasonable person would conclude that her statements were truly statements of fact. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
When the dude is talking about, oh, Germans, Italians, Venezuelans, Colombians, like they're just, when he's saying that they're just coming up with stuff, oh, it's over here, look, there, look, they're stealing it over there, they're stealing over, and it's clear that they, number one, they have no evidence. Number two, they're just making stuff up. And it's actually, now imagine if it was stolen. All of that behavior, so imagine, because you know how Sidney Powell uses the analogy of the dead body? So let's say there's a dead body on the floor. And we're like, okay, so who killed them? And you're like, oh, it was the butler. No, it was the maid. No, it was the chauffeur. No, it was the grandmother. No, it was the uncle. Okay, who was it? You're pointing fingers in all these different directions, and you're undermining the fact that, okay, well, now how are we ever going to find out who actually did it if you're just pointing the fingers everywhere? You're just throwing a whole bunch of stuff at the wall, hoping something sticks. Like, that's absurd. That's absurd to do. And so even if you believe that this was actually, like that the election was actually stolen, Giuliani and Sidney Powell are clowns. They're absolute clowns because they're just pointing fingers every which way. And they have no evidence to support it. And then you see what she says at the end, how Sidney Powell gets up in court and then it's like, oh, nobody could take me seriously. No reasonable person should take me seriously. Think about it. She just said no reasonable person should take her seriously. So what is she saying about anybody who took her seriously? Sidney Powell was saying, if you took her seriously, you're not a reasonable person. I'm not saying it. Sidney Powell said it. Sidney Powell said, if you took her seriously, you're not a reasonable person. But we look at this. Bill Barr says, oh, this was bullshit. His words. I'm not co-signing this. And then people will say, oh, Bill Barr's a rhino. Republican in name only. Okay, he's deep state. Okay. What about Jason Miller, Trump's team? Bill Stepien, Trump's campaign manager. Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law. Ivanka, Trump's daughter. Is everybody deep state? But if Trump is some mastermind, Trump is surrounding himself with good people. How can you in one breath think Trump is a mastermind that surrounds himself with great people, and then in the next breath say all the people that surrounding Trump that he handpicked are betraying him? They're no good. So at the very least, what you're saying is Trump's judgment, Trump's ability to pick a team, Trump's wisdom, his vision is super suspect. Because Trump can't even figure out who to trust. At the very least, that's what you're saying. But that's why I say watching this part of it is absolutely crucial. Absolutely crucial, because this breaks down the ridiculousness of the argument. Like I said, there's still other stuff that I want to check out. I want to check out 2000 Mules, and I will. But you can look at this and just see that there was a lot of nonsense coming from Trump's team. Trump claiming this was a fraud the night of, with not a shred of evidence. Not a shred of evidence did he have at that moment, and he's claiming it's a fraud. No, Donald Trump, you're a fraud. If you're making just a baseless accusation like that, a baseless claim with not a shred of evidence, you're the fraud. Thank you for checking out this episode. This reaction. As always, don't forget to hit the thumbs up, like, share, subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. If you disagree with me, if you think no, they're only showing part of the evidence. Cool. Feel free to let me know what contradicts several of these points, like one of them. What contradicts Trump making the announcement that it's a fraud with no evidence? Write that in the comment section. Tell me what does 2,000 Mules say to address that Trump was making claims that this was a fraud with not a shred of evidence. I'll see you next time.